Alright, well, welcome. We're going to take a look today at this idea, the theory of evolution. So we're going to begin putting together those parts that we've been taking a look at, beginning with Charles Darwin's voyage and going on from there. In the theory of evolution, the first thing you have to deal with is what is a theory. And in the everyday usage, when somebody's trying to come up with an idea, they say, or why something happened, they say, I have a theory. And it just means like a guess or a hunch. But in science, that's not what it means. In science, when we talk about a theory of evolution, or a Big Bang theory, the gravity theory of gravity, what we're talking about is this big, broad idea that has lots and lots and lots of supporting evidence underneath this. These experiments that have been done and tested and retested, and combined with other studies and evidence, and they come up with this this bigger, broader idea, and that's what a theory is. So it's not just a guess or a hunch; it's supported by lots and lots of pieces of evidence. This bigger idea, and so we have the theory of evolution. You can also have the Big Bang theory, not just a TV show, but taking a look at the beginnings of the universe. Or we can talk about what causes objects to be attracted to each other, and describe that under the theory of gravity. Okay. So we're going to take a look at the theory of evolution, which is what Darwin proposed, and many people have added to it. Alfred Russel Wallace was in there with Darwin at the beginning, although that wasn't recognized until a little bit later. And so we start off with this fossil evidence, and so we got fossil, biological, and genetic evidence. We're going to begin with fossil evidence, and here's a fossil of Archaeopteryx, one of the earliest of the birds. And what we look for in the fossil evidence is we look for these transitional species. We look for these organisms that, like Archaeopteryx, that's, it might be the earliest bird or one of the earliest birds that's just beginning to split off from the feathered dinosaurs, the theropods. And so fossils provide us evidence of these common ancestors, these organisms that are just beginning to split off, where it's not necessarily a mixture of the two, but it's got a lot more qualities of one or the other, and we look for these branches. We represent them often in the diagram like this. Wherever these lines split off, that's a common ancestor. So these and these, they're common ancestors right here. These birds and theropods, they're common ancestors right here. These kinds of dinosaurs and birds, they're common ancestors back here. So we're looking for branching points. We get the dinosaurs going up this way, and we get the crocodiles and the relatives go this way. And that's what the fossil record allows us to see, and it gives us this evidence of this change, of this theory of evolution. Okay. Biological evidence, there's a couple pieces we're going to look at from there. One of the pieces is what we call vestigial organs. So an example of that might be the human appendix. In the human appendix, you get something that was probably, take care of this ad here just a second, that was important in plant-eating vertebrates. It was an organ that helps with the digestion of when you have eating a lot of plants. But in humans, you can lose it, and it doesn't cause you any problems. Now, there's probably some secondary purposes for it, but they seem to be relatively minor, at least at this point in time, with our understanding of it. Another place we see that is in wisdom teeth. Humans used to have much larger jaws, and there was room for these extra teeth. And they were probably kind of important when you had poor hygiene and you turned 18, 20 years old and you had lost a lot of teeth. And so then there was room for those wisdom teeth to come in, and you probably needed them to help with the continued digestion. We also see these organs in these vestigial organs, these leftover organs, essentially from an earlier time, in other organisms such as this blind fish that has eyes. They don't work. There's no function to these eyes. They don't allow it to see. These fish live in dark caves, and it's not that they can't see because it's dark down there. They can't see because the eyes don't work. Okay. We can also see in goosebumps and body hair. Humans have body hair that's a little bit on the top and the eyebrows, and there's a couple other places where it has some function, but most of the body, the hair really doesn't have a function. When you get goosebumps, that's good for making yourself look a little scary if you're a cat or other animals, or it's good for maybe helping you to keep warm if you can trap some air underneath that and have it warm up. But when we have as little hair as we have, it doesn't really serve that purpose anymore. And you can also look back in the skeletons of whales. And the skeletons of whales, you can see in the back, you can see just some leftover bones from legs. So leftover hind leg bones in whales. So vestigial organs, these leftover parts that really don't have the same kind of function or much of a function anymore, is one example. Another place where we can see is what we call homologous structures, and these structures have similar similar structures, different functions. And so a common ancestor, these bones were all the same. Obviously, it was the same ancestor. And then as these organisms like humans and horses and cats and bats and birds and whales branched off, they began to develop different uses. So you can see these finger bones in humans taking on a different look within the horses, and then the cats, and then the wings of bats, and at the ends of the wings in the birds, and in the flippers of whales. And you can see that they really are put together in very much the same way, but they end up having slightly different functions in some of them, particularly when you look at bats and birds and whales. Okay. A second line of biological evidence comes from taking a look at the embryos, the beginning stages, early development of organisms. All organisms start as a single cell, and as they go through the early stages, you see a lot of similarities between them. So, for example, we have humans and monkeys and pigs and chickens and salamanders, and very early in development we can see things like gill slits. I got a different color here. You see things like gill slits appearing in all of these. Okay. You can see these limb buds starting off. This is how the limbs begin, is these little buds. So we can see them developing in very similar ways, even though as later in development and as adults, they have very, very different looks to them. And then a third line of evidence comes from taking a look at molecular clocks. And when we look at these molecular clocks, what we're saying is that mutations seem to appear within some of these genes at a standard rate. Maybe it's just so many mutations per million years. So if we look at the common ancestor, of course, you have a certain line of DNA. And then as you develop to the, let's say, 2 different species today, those mutations are appearing within the genes, and so you get a single mutation maybe 25 million years after the common ancestor, and 50 million years later, maybe this is today, you have a couple of mutations. So if you know that you get 1 mutation per 25 million years, you can figure out how long ago these organisms had a common ancestor. And so within the genetics, we get a third line of evidence. We have fossil evidence, biological evidence, and genetic evidence. What I'd like for you to do is take a look at your notes, make sure that you have it filled out. If you're missing any pieces, go back and pick them up. Make sure you get the examples that are in here. And then down at the bottom, I'd like for you to give do a little tree map showing the evidence for biological or for evolution. And so you can start it out like that. You can tell me fossil, biological, genetic, and give me just a few of the details. What do we know about what kind of fossil evidence is there, what kind of biological evidence is there, and what kind of genetic evidence is there. Okay, this isn't necessarily how many for each. This is, I'm just kind of underlining my point. If you missed a part, go back and take a look. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in class. And this again, we're taking a look at the theory of evolution and the evidence for it, and what just in general what a theory is. Okay, I'll see you in class.